The sixth meeting of the 61st session of the Commission for Social Development is called to order. I'm very pleased to invite the Undersecretary General for Economic and Social Affairs, Mr. Lee Genoa, to deliver his opening remarks. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the Fourth Review and Appraisal of the Madrid International Plan of Action on Aging. This discussion has special significance as we are all commemorating the 20th anniversary of the adoption of the Plan of Action and its political declaration. The political declaration recognized that concerted action is required to transform the opportunities and equality of life of men and women as they age, and that's throughout the life course. Despite the uncertainty and increased pressure on resources caused by the ongoing crisis, more than half of all member states participated in this review and appraisal, representing 84% of where older persons reside worldwide. This reaffirms the relevance and the legitimacy of the Madrid International Plan of Action. Now is the time to raise the ambition and urgency of our commitments for older persons. We only need to look at the data. By 2050, the number of older persons is projected to be more than 3 times the number of the children under age 5, and to be almost 2/3 higher than the number of the youth worldwide. Longevity has increased in almost all countries. Globally, babies born in 2022 are expected to live 72.3 years on average, 25 years longer than those born in 1950. We must also recognize that the inequality is at the center of the challenges and the opportunities surrounding population aging. Some of the conclusions from the Fourth Review and Appraisal point to great disparities among and within the regions in implementing the Plan of Action. Differences in aging profiles also determined how individual countries and regions prioritize policies, emerging issues, and challenges. Ladies and gentlemen, the Madrid International Plan of Action continues to provide us with the core principles we need to address the multiple challenges that older persons face today. Building on these principles, recently launched World Social Report 2023 by UN DESA highlighted some of the critical steps we must take to leave no one behind in the aging world. These include thinking about access to health care, education, and decent work opportunities throughout the life course, rethinking retirement policies, and giving greater attention to disparate plight of older women within the context of women's empowerment. The Madrid International Plan of Action on Aging will have a key role in the member states' discussion at upcoming global events, including the 2023 SDG Summit and the 2024 Summit of the Future. To meet this expectation, we must continue to draw on the forward-looking guidance of the Plan of Action and provide a solid foundation to bring about the far-reaching social, economic, environmental, and political changes that are needed to fully realize a society for ages. I wish you a very fruitful discussion in coming meetings. I thank you.
I thank the Undersecretary General for Economic and Social Affairs for his enlightening and informative statement. We will now briefly change the podium to prepare for the high-level panel discussion on the Fourth Review and Appraisal of the Madrid Plan of Action. Thank you.
Muy buenos días.
Good morning. Good morning, distinguished delegates. 20 years ago, 159 governments gathered in Madrid for the Second World Assembly on Aging and adopted a bold agenda and a political declaration to reorient the ways in which governments, non-governmental organizations, and other actors respond to population aging. In particular, the Madrid International Plan of Action on Aging provided recognition that everyone, young and old, had a role to play in promoting solidarity between generations, combating discrimination against older persons, and building a future of security, opportunity, and dignity for persons of all ages. With 239 recommendations related to 35 objectives, covering 18 issues, consolidated under the priority areas, these include the following. 1. Older persons and development. 2. Advancing health and well-being into old age. And 3. Ensuring the existing of an enabling and supportive environment. The Madrid International Plan of Action on Aging remains a crucial, comprehensive framework for the development of policies and programs on population aging. It also provides a solid foundation to bring about the far-reaching social, economic, environmental, and political changes that are needed to fully ensure the enjoyment of human rights by current and future generations of older persons. Implementation of the Madrid Plan of Action is a continuous and dynamic process. This goes hand in hand with its review and appraisal. Those processes are interdependent and continuously evolving, given that the review and appraisal exercise generates knowledge for policymakers, supports action, and promotes public awareness. Ensuring a bottom-up approach to the review and appraisal process is key, which is why the cycle commences at the national level and ascends to the regional level. The United Nations regional commissions play a critical role in this process. They facilitate intra-regional cooperation, provide regional forums, and undertake regional reviews to ensure that the outcomes of the processes at the regional level inform our global review today with this high-level panel. It is also key to adopt a participatory approach to reviewing and appraising the implementation of the Madrid Plan of Action on Aging. That is why the panel today includes expertise from various stakeholders, including older persons themselves. First, I'd like to provide an overview of how we will proceed this morning. In commemoration of the 20-year milestone of the Madrid Plan of Action, we will listen to a keynote address entitled Plan of Action of Madrid Plus 20, Looking Back, Moving Forward. This will be followed by the panel discussion. The main objective is to provide more information from a regional perspective than could be shared in the report of the Secretary General on implementation of this International Plan of Action on Aging. The aim is also to stimulate an interactive discussion and facilitate an open exchange of views among all participants, including member states especially, and non-governmental organizations. To facilitate interactive discussion, panelists will make one round of short presentations, followed by a question and answer period and interactive discussion. I am pleased to welcome the distinguished panelists of our high-level panel discussion on the Fourth Review and Appraisal of the Madrid Plan of Action on Aging. We have Her Excellency Aishat Mohammed Didi, Minister of Gender and Social Affairs of the Maldives, and Chair of the Intergovernmental Meeting for the Asia-Pacific Review and Appraisal, Mr. Mohammed Mekdadi, Secretary General of the Council of Family Affairs in Jordan, Her Excellency Paula Nervais Ojeda, Permanent Representative of Chile to the United Nations, Ms. Omokaro, Director General of the National Senior Citizens Center in Nigeria, Mr. Alfredo Ferrante, Coordinator at the Department of Family Policies at the Presidency of the Council of Ministers of Italy, and Chair of the Standing Working Group on Aging of the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, Ms. Carol Ocero Ogengo, representative of HelpAge International, a global alliance for the rights of older people, Ms. Hadra Molenkopf, sociologist and gerontologist and board member of the German National Association of Senior Citizens Organizations. Welcome to all. To begin, I have the pleasure to welcome the distinguished keynote speaker, Mr. Alexander Sidorenko, Senior Advisor at the European Center for Social Welfare Policy and Research. Mr. Sidorenko, you have the floor. Thank you.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, progress in advancing international action on aging is undeniable. The achievements of international action on aging built on the consensus reached 20 years ago at the Second World Assembly on Aging in Madrid. The consensus is that, quote, humanity must respond to the opportunities and challenges of aging in the 21st century and contribute to building a society for all ages, unquote, as stated in the Madrid Political Declaration. Progress is seen in all three priority directions of the Madrid Plan of Action, as distinguished chair just listed. No doubts, the principles and objectives of the plan have shown themselves to remain valid, as noted in the Secretary General's report to the current session of the Commission for Social Development. Meanwhile, the present Fourth Review and Appraisal also concludes that, I quote, great disparities exist among and within regions in the rate of implementation of the Madrid Plan of Action. What are the causes of the disparities? Where did we miss and what? First of all, we failed to convince society, and especially the younger generations, that all the years of life can be lived with dignity. We need to break down traditional notions of aging as the time of decline and loss by promoting a positive yet realistic image of aging. And most importantly, by guaranteeing the human, social, and economic rights of older persons. These issues have been at the center of deliberations of the open-ended working group on aging supported by the United Nations Programme on Aging of the Department of Economic and Social Affairs. Our second failure is that we have been unable to convince economists, industrialists, and politicians that older people are a potential resource for growth and development. Aging is still mostly seen as a problem and older members of society as a burden. The potential benefits of healthy longevity and the second demographic dividend are considered a nice scholar construct at best, and their potential are omitted in policy making. Third, our approaches to aging remain reactive rather than proactive. Reactive efforts to meet the needs of older people and counteract challenges of population aging must be complemented by proactive and preventive efforts to adapt the entire society to the demographic transition and build a society for all ages, as envisaged by the Madrid Plan of Action. The Madrid Plan has been credited for establishing the developmental dimension of policy on aging. The developmental dimension must be aligned and intervened with the humanitarian dimension. However, humanitarian crisis in Africa and Southeast Asia, COVID-19 pandemic, and the Russian invasion of Ukraine attested the opposite. Older persons are often excluded from humanitarian relief programs. There is abundance of recommendations on what has to be done in both developmental and humanitarian dimensions of policy on aging. The enduring challenge is how to do it. We have achieved the regionalization of the Madrid Plan of Action, and the United Nations Regional Commissions play a pivotal role in translating of the Madrid Plan into a regional context and giving it national content. We must strengthen nationalization and promote localization as the main content of the implementation of the Madrid Plan in the future. The United Nations Interagency Group on Aging can serve as the platform for consultation and coordination of the work of the regional commissions to promote bottom-up action on aging around the world. 40 years ago, Javier Pérez de Cuellar, at that time the United Nations Secretary General, noted that the First World Assembly on Aging in Vienna in 1982, I quote, was one of the few occasions on which an issue of global impact and importance had been considered by the international community at a relatively early stage before it was too late, unquote. Yes, we started early, 40 years ago. Yes, we have made significant progress, as reflected in the report of the Secretary General to the current session of the Commission. But challenges still prevail, and time is running out. We must rise to the challenges and accelerate the movement towards a society for all ages before it is too late. I thank you.
Doy las gracias. Doy las gracias al señor Sidorenko por...
Thank you, Mr. Sidorenko, for his keynote address. Before we begin the panel discussion, I wish to remind panelists to keep within their allocated time limit of 5 to 7 minutes per presentation. And delegations who can speak after this panel briefing, delegations will have to keep within the 3-minute time limit during the interactive discussion. I would welcome the help of all panelists and delegations to keep to this time limits in order to ensure interactive discussion and effective exchange of views. So we will now begin the panel discussion. I will now give the floor to Her Excellency Aishat Mohammed Didi, Minister of Gender and Social Affairs of the Maldives, and Chair of the Intergovernmental Meeting for the Asia-Pacific Review and Appraisal. Madam Minister, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair and Moderator. Your Excellency, Ms. Ali Ahmed, Saif Al-Thani, Chair of the 61st session of the Commission for Social Development, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for giving me the opportunity to address this high-level panel at the Commission on Social Development. As the Chair of the Asia-Pacific Intergovernmental Meeting on the Fourth Review and Appraisal of the Madrid Plan of Action, MIPAA, it is my pleasure to report that the Fourth Review was held in Bangkok from 29th June to 1st July 2022. Representatives of more than 30 member states and numerous civil society organizations and international entities participated. The meeting adopted an outcome document which calls for accelerating the implementation of MIPAA in Asia and the Pacific. Ladies and gentlemen, compared to other regions, population aging is very rapid in Asia and the Pacific. Whereas countries in Europe or Northern America took more than a century to transition from an aging to an aged society, it is taking countries in Asia and Pacific 20 to 30 years. In my country, the Maldives, it will take about 13 years for the share of the older population to increase from 7% to 14%. Given this speed, countries have less time to adopt and implement policies to address the challenges and opportunities of population aging. Moreover, given the sheer number of older persons in the region, levels and trends in population aging in Asia and the Pacific shape trends at the global level. At the Fourth Review and Appraisal, the meeting participants recognized the importance of regional cooperation and learning from each other, including learning from mistakes. Regional cooperation is particularly important in the following areas. Firstly, promoting training and skill development in the care of older persons. This is very relevant in a region where the family has been the main provider of care and there is limited availability of geriatric training. Secondly, harnessing the insights from scientific multidisciplinary research on aging, including on the use of technology to benefit older persons. And thirdly, advocating for quantifying the caregiving contribution of older persons to the economy in national accounts, including recognition of unpaid care for family members, especially for women. At the national level, member states committed to ensuring coordinated multi-sectoral responses, mainstreaming of aging into national development policies, and the strengthening of multilateral and multi-stakeholder partnerships. They also committed to increase in national awareness, capacity, and resources to prepare for and respond to population aging, and developing an inclusive, adaptive, and rights-based approach to social protection systems, paying particular attention to older persons, mainstreaming the perspective of older women into national responses, and investing in the use of digital technologies to address the challenges and opportunities of population aging. Above all, member states reaffirmed their commitment to promoting and protecting the rights of older persons. They stressed that any form of ageism, including age discrimination directed at older persons, must be stopped. With a view to the global level, member states emphasized the synergies between MIPAA, the 2030 Agenda, and the United Nations Decade of Healthy Aging. Therefore, population aging must be integrated into any development agenda now and in the future, and intergenerational solidarity must be strengthened. Ladies and gentlemen, the number and share of older persons is increasing everywhere, and we need to understand that we will not achieve the 2030 Agenda or any future development agenda if older persons are being left behind. Let us build sustainable societies for all ages now. Thank you.
Doy las gracias a la...
I thank you very much to this Minister of Gender and Social Affairs of the Maldives and the Chair of the Intergovernmental Meeting for the Asia-Pacific Review and Appraisal for her statement. I now give the floor to Mr. Mohammed Makdadi, Secretary General of the Council of Family Affairs in Jordan. Sir, you have the floor.
Shukran Jazil.
Thank you very much indeed. And due thanks as well for this kind invitation to address something that is of paramount importance for issues related to aging and elderly in the Arab region. Ladies and gentlemen, in the pan-Arab region and Arab countries, we cannot say that care for the aging as a theme is uniform across the board, for it varies in terms of level, substance, and quality across the Arab countries, because you have some rich countries, and of course you have high, middle income and low income countries in that region. The issue of aging and transition into these issues is still very nascent concern in the Arab region. However, it is expected that within the next 15 years to see a higher proportion of this age cohort from 7% to 14% of total population. Probably these are modest figures and probably could be the culprit that there is no such interest in this theme, in particular in that region. because they still focus on providing care for the elderly rather than to address it as it should be. And we have to switch from the care-based approach in the Arab region, which is within the family or the single household, as we have to switch to it as one of the key pillars of development across the board. This is yet to materialize in the Arab region. Many elderly people are still at risk of poverty, exclusion, discrimination, and sickness. Not all of them are included in the social protection programs in that region, and many Arab countries lack welfare and care programs that provide affordable care and social protection. Policies are still rump and incomplete on aging issues, and that's why they are put at greater risk. 62% of the elderly are above the age of pension, and they are yet to receive pension benefits. 75% is the overall percentage of spending from their own pocket on health issues. 2 out of every 3 elderly persons are illiterate in 6 Arab countries. Elderly women are less than their male counterparts when it comes to enjoying social protection. And sometimes the pension benefit or salary for males is like 5 times what women are paid in pension. 85% of population in the Arab region are 60 years or older, and they are heads of household. And this requires further requirements to make a living, and that's why it would be very challenging for them to spend on their own health care. As for the disability rates in the Arab region, we find that 65 plus years of age people make 31% of the population, and those are people with disabilities, and they have to pay more for health care, increasing the risk level and the poverty risk at the same time. Data available on aging and gerontology in general is very poor, be it broken down by their needs, socioeconomic status, etc. Many countries across the Arab region have expanded their medical coverage and health insurance programs. However, 70% of the elderly in some Arab countries are yet to be covered in this medical insurance schemes, and that's why we believe that we have to work more across the Arab region and globally for that matter to develop the social protection, social security, to adapt it to be able to address the requirements of the elderly and things that come with aging, and to switch the mentality from just providing care to development issues. We need to enhance the social safety nets in the Arab countries, and we need to boost and support their ability to accommodate all elderly people in urban and rural centers, and we have to foster the capacity of the healthcare facilities and systems to provide service for the elderly, and also to support the role of the NGOs and civil society organizations in addressing the needs, and also to provide support to the individual initiatives at the community level who are better positioned to offer services sometimes. And also to ratify and endorse the UN Convention on the Rights of the Elderly, which is still being developed, of course, and that's why it's time to adopt it and to use it as a guideline for all countries, namely the Arab countries, because this would prompt them to place aging on their national agendas, and we need to provide databases about the elderly, their domiciles, their locations, their various needs, and assessment thereof. And we need also to institutionalize health care provided for the elderly. We need to capitalize on the service of volunteers across the universities to provide health care. And also we need to adapt and amend many pieces of legislation and laws to make them more accommodating to keep them abreast with the international instruments in this regard. We need to continue to work on review and assessment of the Madrid Plan of Action in the Arab region, because such a review and such an appraisal would become a tool to push forward with more emphasis on issues related to aging. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias.
I thank the Secretary General of the Council of Family Affairs in Jordan for his statement. I now give the floor to Her Excellency Paula Narvaez Ojeda, Permanent Representative of Chile to the United Nations. Ambassador, you have the floor. Thank you very much, Chair. I extend my greetings to all those here and my fellow panelists. Aging of the population and life expectancy growth in Latin America and the Caribbean and in the world generate new opportunities and challenges for societies. This poses multiple challenges in public policies. In 2022, the region's population was 662 million. Of this amount, 13.4% were persons over the age of 60. In 2030, this will increase to 16.5% of the total population. In 2050, a quarter of the total population will be persons over the age of 60. In Chile, the recent National Survey on Disability and Dependence of 2022 shows that in the category of older persons, that is where we see the relationship between least access to financial resources and the greater presence of disability and dependency. In our region, we believe that to advance human rights of all older persons, what is needed is to universalize their access to social protection and to quality health services. However, this is much easier said than done. To achieve the standards we want, we need to tackle various aspects, many of these structural, such as access to decent old age pensions, access to quality health and appropriate health care, and providing care services for those who require this among the aging population. As a region, in 2022, Chile chaired the Regional Intergovernmental Conference on Aging and the Rights of Older Persons in Latin America and the Caribbean. In addition, last December in Santiago, we held the 5th Intergovernmental Regional Conference with broad participation from member states of ECLAC, representatives of civil society, and UN agencies, funds, and programs. The aim of that conference was to examine progress made by countries in the region as regards public policies for older persons, as well as to identify key actions to broaden the protection of older persons. At the 5th Regional Conference, states adopted the Santiago Declaration, where they set out their commitment to the Madrid Plan of Action and the promotion and protection and respect of human rights, dignity, fundamental freedoms of all older persons without any type of discrimination or violence. They also affirmed that states are responsible for providing means and actions to guarantee old age that is healthy, in dignity, and with rights. They set out to adopt effective measures against discrimination based on age and to eliminate challenges that remain in the region as regards participation of older persons. States urged governments to include in their cross-cutting, including in their policies and programs for development, the matter of aging, implementing specific policies for older persons, The declaration affirmed the commitment to developing universal social protection systems that are sustainable and resilient, and ensuring guaranteed access without discrimination to quality health, housing, and basic services. The necessary resources are needed to ensure the full exercise of the human rights of older persons. That was affirmed, as well as the declaration set out to bolster administrative registers, to facilitate the collection of data, to set out statistics, to improve evaluation and monitoring of the situation of this population group, and to strengthen policies that are sensitive to their needs. We also recognize the crucial role of civil society, the private sector, and academia in implementing, monitoring, and evaluating and disseminating the Madrid Plan of Action. In this endeavor for Latin America and the Caribbean, the Declaration of Santiago urged making a proposal for a multilateral legal instrument. This is to strengthen the international system for protecting older persons. Civil society organizations played a key role at the Fifth Regional Conference in preparation of this. In this declaration, the contribution of the Madrid Plan of Action is recognized in the human rights paradigm in the region. We also called for intergenerational activities, called for strengthening of the civil society organizations, and to ensure pro-older person actions in the region, and for a universal convention. This is very important. They urged moving towards a universal convention. In the global and regional context of profound social, economic, political, climate, and technological changes, implementation of the Madrid Plan of Action is important. For Latin America and the Caribbean, we have looked at inequality in its various dimensions in depth, looking at poverty and the weakness of social protection and health systems. The region has also suffered the devastating effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, which has highlighted unequal access to socioeconomic services and access to health and social protection services for the most vulnerable, which includes older persons. As the government of Chile stated at the regional conference, states need to implement more demanding, more suitable public policies that improve the lives of older persons. We need actions for ensuring health care that takes on a social approach and is people-centered. This must be accompanied by the promotion of healthy lifestyles and social participation. This means fostering healthy aging, strengthening plans, programs, and strategies for older persons, focusing on social protection, autonomy, and the participation of older persons in society. Improving economic financial conditions for older persons through structural reforms to the pension systems. And this should foresee increasing the pensions in order and also to advance structural reforms such as the creation and implementation of a national care system. 20 years after the implementation of the Madrid Plan of Action, and in our region now we are seeing that action is urgent, and Chile believes that these challenges can only be addressed if states work jointly. Governments, community organizations, civil society, international organizations, and experts on this matter. We are committed to overcoming these challenges and to leave no one behind, no older persons behind. Our endeavor is decisive and ongoing. Thank you.
Señora representante
Thank you to the permanent representative of Chile to the United Nations. I now call on Ms. Omokaru, Director General of the National Senior Citizen Center in Nigeria. You have the floor, Madam.
Mr. Vice Chair, Your Excellencies, fellow panelists, non-governmental organizations here present. Nigeria is pleased today to present the highlights of progress, the key findings and recommendations of the African Regional Review of MIPAA 2018-2022. The highlights of achievements and the emerging issues and recommendations rely heavily on the responses of and findings of member states through designated national focal persons who organized national level reviews, and this national level included multi-sectoral ministries, departments, and agencies. Also included the participation of civil society organizations and also all the persons themselves. While Africa is often rightly described as a youthful continent, the scale and the speed of the demographic change calls for increased attention to the aging population. There has been an accelerated increase in the population of older persons in the past decade at a rate of 0.9%, faster than the growth rate of the general population. So this is significant, and the older person's population can no longer be ignored. There is, however, in Africa, significant variations in the growth rates and patterns of population aging. Africa is a continent of 54 countries, and it is not homogeneous. So the northern and the southern regions exhibit rapid growth, while the west and the central regions show moderate to slow growth. However, across Africa, the share of the older person's population is projected to increase from 6.6% in 1990 to 8.3% in 2023, that's presently. In absolute numbers, 21 million persons lived in Africa in 1990. Now we have 110 million older persons. That's this year, 2023. People are living longer in Africa. Life expectancy has increased from 51.7 years in 1990 to 1995, now to 62.4 years. So somebody who is 60 years is expected to live further 17 years in Africa. The African population of persons aged 65 years and above has also increased from about 8 million in 1950 to about 50 million. That's 4% in 2017. This figure is estimated to triple to 173.6 million by 2050. The Madrid International Plan of Action on Aging, MIPAA, provides a very comprehensive, multi-sectoral, and integrated policy objectives. It identifies priority thematic areas for member states to consider and to be guided. Without the Madrid International Plan of Action on Aging, issues of aging and older persons will still remain fragmented, to still remain within the welfare purview. Issues will still be seen as haphazard, ad hoc, fragmented, and then would not be seen as developmental issues. So Madrid International Plan of Action as a policy instrument is very relevant. It draws attention to the multi-sectoral, intersecting issues of aging. And it allows and informs the government to ensure that there are coordinating entities to ensure this multi-sectoral, this cross-ministerial approach to aging. It also informs a life course approach, an intergenerational approach to issues of older persons. So MIPAA has informed mainstreaming of aging into every single developmental issue, whether it be housing, transportation, health, social programs, recreation, sports, enabling environments. So MIPAA has ensured that this information is out there. So MIPAA's review focuses on asking those questions that would make member states to really sit up and review their actions. Questions like, do you have an entity that coordinates? Do you have mechanisms that engage older people? Do you have strategies that will show you how to navigate the multi-sectoral issues? Do you have data on older persons? Are the data disaggregated? Have older persons been mainstreamed into all other developmental, sectors? And it is my, place here to inform about the findings when it came to the regional review concerning African member states. I would like to start by saying that about 1/3 of African countries, there's about 18 countries in Africa, have developed comprehensive national policies on aging. They've developed strategies and various programs to implement the targets set in the 3 priority areas of MIPAA. Some member states in Africa have advanced quite well in implementing the various priority areas of MIPAA, while others have not gone beyond the phase of formulating the strategies. Before I go into sharing the quantitative and the qualitative evidence, I would really like to share what the review revealed about MIPAA as an instrument and how well it has been received in the African region. There is a lack of awareness and utilization of MIPAA as a policy instrument in the African region. The regional review revealed that unlike other development frameworks like SDGs and the UN Decade of Healthy Aging, that MIPAA is not very well known. So this consequently is hampering the domestication of MIPAA into regional and national policy and programs. The low response rate by member states to the review could also be attributed to this. So there is therefore an urgent need to popularize and mobilize commitment to MIPAA across the African region. There is also the lack of national legislation. In Africa, we have noticed by this review that member states that have done well, adopted MIPAA and mainstream MIPAA into their policies and are implementing MIPAA are those member states that have national legislations that compel the establishment of statutory coordinating entities on aging, like Nigeria. The lack or the very limited political commitment is correlated with the enactment of legislation in aging. 9 out of 11 countries that reported significant strides in implementation of MIPAA had enacted laws that clearly established the entitlements of older people while putting a duty of care on public institutions to promote the rights and the well-being of older people. The next challenge that we found in African Regional Review was the weak institutional and human resource capacity. Most of the policymakers, the planners, implementers, have no training in aging policy, strategy, policy, program development and designs, monitoring and evaluation frameworks when it comes to aging. And especially mainstreaming now becomes very difficult when aging is now to be mainstreamed into other related fields, and there are officers who do not know anything about aging. So the region is falling behind in investing in programs and developing institutional capacities to achieve the aspirations of MIPAA. There is also limited research capacity and the paucity of disaggregated data and data management systems. Because, of course, you know that older persons for so long had been excluded in development issues. So most national survey programs excluded older people. And so when now we are talking about mainstreaming MIPAA into policy frameworks, there is that paucity, that gap, that data gap. And so presently, there are many countries that are in Africa that are getting ready to conduct census. And so it is our belief that because there is now an awareness of aging and aging issues, that the multi-indicators of aging have been mainstreamed into these census exercises. There is also limited financing of aging programs, and these are not unrelated to the handicaps of ageism. The negative stereotypes about older persons, that investment in older persons they don't yield dividend. And of course, the simultaneous challenges of the youth population and the focus on the trust of policy on the youth, that has stopped investments or not stopped sufficient investment in older people. MIPAA is not always included in cross-ministerial synergies, where you have issues of SDGs, the Decade of Healthy Aging, have issues discussing AU 2063 framework. You will hardly hear about MIPAA. So it is very advisable that for implementation to move further, that MIPAA has to be mainstreamed and brought center and forward to be part of this synergy, where we are talking about SDGs, we are talking about UN Decade of Healthy Aging. MIPAA has to come front and center and has to be mainstreamed in inter-ministerial discussions. There is also the diversity in responses of African member states. And this has posed some challenges when we come to universal definitions of concepts. For instance, even the issue of the chronological age. So who is an older person? In Africa, we have different definitions of older person by chronological age. My country is 60 years by virtue of retirement age. But there are some countries within Africa, some even in the sub-region, that have other age definition of older people. So in closing, how can we accelerate the implementation of MIPAA? For MIPAA to move forward, there has to be a legal backing. Nigeria is an example. For a long time, 20 years, we did not know about MIPAA. We never used MIPAA. But with the National Senior Citizen Center Act and the setting up of a legal entity in charge of aging, now there is multi-sectoral coordination, and the review and appraisal of MIPAA was very easy. So African countries should really emphasize the establishment of legal frameworks to back up policy frameworks. There cannot be a dichotomy. Where you have a strong policy framework, there has to be a strong legal framework. And I believe that the UN Convention on the Rights of Older Persons would provide us the normative standards and the compelling framework to ensure that MIPAA is implemented. Thank you very much.
Doy las gracias a la directora general.
I thank the Director General of the National Senior Citizen Center in Nigeria for her statement. We will now move on, and I would ask, please, the panelists to stay within the 5 to 7 minute timeline. We will have the interactive debate, and then we will give the floor back to the panelists if they wanted to go in further depth. I will now give the floor to Mr. Alfredo Ferrante, Coordinator at the Department of Family Policies at the Presidency of the Council of Ministers of Italy and Chair of the Standing Working Group on Aging of the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much, Chair. Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, and ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure for me to take part in this high-level panel session representing the UNICE region. The Commission this year takes place in a particular complex framework for all our countries, in a moment that has been significantly shaped by many events that occurred in recent years. 2022 marked the 20th anniversary of the adoption of the Madrid International Plan of Action of Aging, an important milestone for the protection and advancement of older persons' rights. Indeed, over the last 5 years, significant progress has been made by the majority of the UNICE member states, recognizing the potential of older persons, encouraging inter alia longer working lives, and the ability to work, and ensuring aging with dignity. The MIPAA Plus 20 report for the EC region revealed the EC countries are increasingly recognizing the importance of mainstreaming aging in public policies, especially in key long-term national development strategies, including by strengthening the coordination among all relevant stakeholders and the involvement of older persons and their representatives in the decision-making processes affecting them. Over the last 5 years, many are the EC states that focus on extending the working life of older persons in their countries by identifying older job seekers as a key target group for employment policies and offering them tailored support, including rehabilitation initiatives and labor forces reintegration programs, as well as by investing in developing their skills, especially digital skills. Poverty in older age, especially among women, is a persistent issue in the majority of ECE countries and received significant attention as well. Efforts were made by countries to compensate for, and more importantly, also to prevent the emergence of a gender pension gap through measures that compensate for pensions contributions during periods of care work and through an enhanced drive to reduce the gender pay gap. Countries have also taken concrete actions to promote human rights, the autonomy and the self-determination of older persons, and to fight their isolation in light with 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development by progressing the institutionalization in long-term care, developing support infrastructures, encouraging research in the sector of assisted living technologies, and promoting alternative living arrangements in various forms, such as intergenerational and supported housing. Awareness raising and training initiatives have been implemented by a number of countries with a view to better responding to cases of violence and abuse against older persons. The efforts I just mentioned, which represent only a small share of the massive work done by the EC member states, covered by the Fourth Review and Appraisal of MIPAA, should not be taken for granted anyway, as they were made in the context of several crises, changes, and unprecedented challenges. The increased pressure of private and public finances, as well as on health and social services, the growing awareness of the effects of climate change, the digital transformation and the emergency crisis, including the COVID-19 pandemics and the armed conflict in Ukraine. All of them had a disproportionate impact on older persons. The Fourth Review and Appraisal of MIPAA was concluded in the UNICE region with the UNICE Ministerial Conference on Aging held in Rome, Italy, in June 2022 last year. As a testimony of the importance of building synergies and cooperation between governments and civil society to promote older people's rights, the conference was preceded by a joint forum of civil society and scientific research. The events resulted in the adoption of 2 declarations, respectively the 2022 Rome Ministerial Declaration and the Declaration of the Joint Forum. In particular, the Rome Ministerial Declaration commits all UNICE member states to the implementation of a set of priority actions on MIPAA to be carried out over the next 5 years, grouped under 3 main comprehensive policy goals, namely, first, promoting active and healthy aging throughout life; second, ensuring access to long-term and support for carers and families; 3, mainstreaming aging to advance a society for all ages. Among the priorities identified under the first policy goal, member states committed inter alia to a deep cultural change towards a healthy lifestyle to be promoted over the entire life course, by investing in strategies aimed at facilitating and encouraging physical activity, healthy nutrition, preventive health intervention, and strengthening mental health and well-being. Commitments have also been taken of recognizing and supporting the continued role of informal and family care by taking measures to help carers balance paid work, care, and private life, and strengthening intergenerational solidarity. Last but not least, mainstreaming aging was introduced as a key priority. In this respect, states committing to developing or strengthening a strategy framework for mainstreaming aging across all policies, a participatory stakeholder engagement approach to ensure that older persons are listened to and actively involved in meaningful cross-sectoral dialogue and collaboration on aging between all relevant actors in the public and private sector, academia, social partners, and civil society, as recommended by the UNICE Guidelines on Mainstreaming Aging that the UNICE Standing Working Group on Aging issued in 2021. To advance the implementation of MIPAA, strengthen institutional mechanisms that enhance coordination and collaboration on aging are needed at national but also international level. In the UNICE region, happy to share that we were able to strengthen the intergovernmental mechanism for regional cooperation on aging by upgrading the Working Group on Aging to a standing working group in 2020, with a longer-term mandate for regional cooperation on the implementation of MIPAA. Colleagues and ladies and gentlemen, aging is a challenge that we all share for the future. Addressing it through an holistic approach will lead to better policies that will ultimately allow us not to only protect older persons' rights, but also value their enormous experience and potential contributions to our society's well-being. This is what we, all the stakeholders, all together, need to do to ensure that no one is left behind. Thank you very much.
Doy las gracias al coordinador.
I thank the coordinator at the Department of Family Policies, at the Presidency of the Council of Ministers of Italy, and Chair of the Standing Working Group on Aging of the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe. Thank you for your statement. I now give the floor to academia and civil society. Ms. Carol Ocero Agengo, representative of Help Age International, a global alliance for the rights of older people member organization. Madam, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. Ladies and gentlemen, fellow panelists, the relevance of the MIPAA as a resource to governments, non-governmental organizations, and other actors to reorient the ways in which our societies perceive, interact with, and care for older citizens is as relevant today as it was in 2002 when the MIPAA was adopted. Yet the ground has shifted significantly. The world is aging fast, and the numbers are significant. We've heard about them, and what I've retained is 1.6 billion older people by 2050. As populations age, so also are the dynamics within which populations find themselves. Inequalities are deepening, conflicts are happening right from the family level all the way up to between countries, as we have seen in the Ukraine war. We have seen the impact of climate change that is only beginning to become clear for us as a society. Our systems are ill-equipped to deal with aging, and we've seen this from the COVID-19 that still rears its head in certain parts of the world. If the COVID-19 pandemic were to happen in a few years, I think would be in a difficult situation if it was to happen when we have the 1.6 billion older people. We have heard from my fellow panelists about the MIPAA review, and I'm not going to belabor that, but what I want to just highlight is the caution that, for example, the Africa review threw that economic growth could be lost in a few decades in Africa if we do not plan for the growing older population. The MIPAA is the first comprehensive global agreement which recognizes older people as contributors to development in their societies. and it commits governments to including aging in all social economic development policies, including poverty reduction programs. There are opportunities for member states to work in collaboration with civil society organizations to strengthen the implementation of the MIPAA in building a society for all ages. There's a lot that needs to be done and can be done. On the implementation, the outcomes of the previous cycles demonstrate that despite overall progress in the implementation of the MIPAA since its adoption, there is opportunity to strengthen its implementation so that an increased number of member states can mainstream aging issues and the specific needs of older people in their national policies. Secondly, voluntary reporting. Because MIPAA is not a legally binding instrument, government reporting on its implementation is also voluntary. Aging must be viewed from a life course approach, and the reporting on MIPAA prioritized by member states. Number 3, international cooperation. MIPAA emphasizes the need for enhanced international cooperation to support developing countries, least developed countries, and countries with economies in transition. There is need for the aging to be firmly put on the radar of all governments because it is relevant to the future of the young people, especially in a continent like Africa. There is need for resources, coordination, and technical support. And there is also need, number 5, for consultations with civil society and meaningful participation of older people. It has to be a bottoms-up approach, which entails involving civil society and older persons themselves in the impact of the MIPAA on the quality of older persons. It cannot be tokenistic. Number 6, human rights and the need for a convention. Development and rights are interconnected, and the absence of one weakens the advancement of another. Aging is a reality that needs to be included in a firm human rights instrument. The MIPAA is an important international policy framework, granted, but there are certain gaps that would only be filled by a binding instrument. The numbers that we spoke about are mind-blowing. They cannot be ignored. Africa is a young continent, for example, but the youth is aging, and everywhere apart from Africa, young people are all older people in waiting. It is therefore in their best interest to ensure the same way we take insurance for our cars, let us ensure the future for the older people that we will become in the future. Aging is a critical part of development, and older people have capabilities to contribute to that development. We are living in a digital world, and let us take advantage of that digitalization. For the younger people, let us make aging go viral. It is important because we will step into the older ages, and we want to step into the older ages that is secure and where we can contribute to the development of the world. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias a la representante.
Thank you very much.
Doy las gracias a la representante de HelpAge International.
Thank you to the representative of HelpAge International for her presentation. I now give the floor to our last panelist, Ms. Heidrun Mollenkopf, sociologist and gerontologist, and board member of the German National Association of Senior Citizens Organizations. You have the floor, madam.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to contribute to this high-level panel from the perspective of a social scientist. We are gathered here to celebrate the 20th anniversary and relevance of MIPAA and to discuss the changes needed to make this important policy tool future-proof for current and future challenges and generations. Let me first make a few remarks about relevant changes that have taken place in the 20 years since MIPAA was drafted and adopted, and which need to be included in further considerations. First, the well-known change in population structure. The population of older persons is increasing both in numbers and as a share of the total. Life expectancy has increased globally by more than 6 years from 2000 to 2019. But life expectancy in the least developed countries lags 7 years behind the global average. Second, the spatial and technical frameworks for aging have changed dramatically. For example, the number of cars worldwide has doubled from 2000 to 2022, with enormous positive but also negative effects, also on the mobility options for older persons. The requirements for communication and information changed in a similar way. But while the digital population is visibly growing on many parts of the world, internet access and availability differ significantly depending on the region. The estimated global average was an internet penetration rate of 69% in 2022. This means that about 2/3 of the global population are currently connected to the World Wide Web, and 1/3 is not. This applies in particular to women and older persons. Women had less access to the internet than men, and the global digital population aged 65 or older represent just 5.5% of all internet users worldwide. Imagine what this means for their everyday living and right to social and societal participation in an increasingly digitized world. The facts spell out a world digital divide. In fact, a global divide between developed and less developed countries, and a social divide within each country. Both must be closed. A third change that affects the framework conditions for the aging of an ever-increasing proportion of older people is the growing flow of refugees worldwide. An estimated 103 million people have been forcibly displaced from their homes due to serious events in 2022. This is more than twice as many as a decade ago. The proportion of people over 60 among them doesn't seem to be very, very high at 5%, but it means that there are currently more than 3 million older men and almost 2 million older women on the run worldwide. In view of these far-reaching developments, which do not even include climate change, these topics were also included as key points in the joint declaration drawn up for the first time in a joint effort by representatives of the scientific community and non-governmental organizations on the Fourth Review and Appraisal of MIPAA. In fact, older persons are particularly affected by these developments, and their needs, their hardships, their rights are almost always neglected or completely overlooked. And quite often, measures are determined over their heads without respecting their position and autonomy. Other problems and inadequate legal protections identified in the joint declaration that need to be considered if we want MIPAA to continue to be a valuable political tool include the persistent ageism and discrimination against older people, the intolerable persistence of violence, especially against older women, as well as different emerging societal phenomena, such as the growing share of persons living alone without children or close siblings, the increasing diversity of sexual orientations, or the coexistence of mixed religious and ethnic communities, and how these changes will change the conditions and perceptions of age. Multidisciplinary and cross-cultural research in combination with the involvement of relevant stakeholders can contribute to the advancement of knowledge in these areas. We must promote geriatric and gerontological research that collects age and sex differentiated data on older people. And we need to include them in clinical trials. As we have seen over the past 20 years, MIPAA provides an extraordinarily useful basis for initiating political processes at national and international levels, because it has been based on the human rights of older persons from the very beginning, and member states have committed themselves to this approach. However, most of the challenges and legal shortcomings just mentioned have persisted from the implementation of MIPAA until today. The scientific community, together with non-governmental organizations, is therefore calling for greater binding force to substantiate the MIPAA process and to reinforce the policy efforts made by member states to achieve MIPAA's goals. We align with the Secretary General's recommendations and call on governments to draft a legally binding instrument that applies worldwide to safeguard in all policy areas the equal application of universal human rights in older age. And allow me to add some short personal thoughts. As a person born during World War II, I have never known my father, because like the fathers of millions of other children, he perished in that devastating war. And the same is happening again today in many parts of the world. And we in Europe are seeing it firsthand in Ukraine. I'm asking myself, and I'm asking all those who are planning the next work items of MIPAA, how will these children grow up and grow old? How will especially women, but also men of the middle generation age, who have lost their partners or who will never find one because of the fatal wars? And finally, what happens to the older men and women who lose their sons, often their daughters and grandchildren as well, in these wars? And this not just in relation to a current emergency, in which assistance and rights must be granted to them as a matter of course, but also in relation to their grief, their emotional, spiritual situation, if they are deprived of their generative future perspective. What do we know about these challenges from earlier war and post-war times? And what new research do we need to better understand and cope with future ones? With these questions, I conclude my reflections, and I hope that all the aspects which are important for our current and future aging will be included in the forthcoming new plan of action on aging. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Ms. Molenkov, for your statement. Distinguished delegates, distinguished panelists, I will now be opening the floor for any questions or comments for the panelists. Before opening the floor for the interactive exchange, I would now invite delegations wishing to make comments and pose questions to press the microphone button to request the floor. The list of speakers will be closed in 3 minutes. I also take the opportunity to remind the ministers and high-level representatives of member states. We will try to give priority to them in giving the floor, but also civil society organizations. Thank you for your cooperation. And I'd also like to recall, once again, not to go over 3 minutes' time so that all can participate. Thank you. I will now start with our list of speakers. Firstly, we have Ms. Florence Bohr, Cabinet Secretary of the Minister of Labor and Social Protection of Kenya. Honorable Minister, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, since its endorsement by the General Assembly in 2002, Kenya has constantly submitted its periodic implementation of MIPAA to the United Nations. In May 2022, Kenya made its submissions for the Fourth Review of MIPAA, which took stock of implementation of the 3 priority areas, namely older persons and development, advancing health and well-being into old age, ensuring enabling and supportive environments. On the first priority, older persons and development, the government of Kenya has implemented the following programs. One is first, the Older Persons Cash Transfer Program was established to support vulnerable persons. The government's spending on social protection has progressively increased from 0.8% of GDP in 2014 to 1.5% in 2019. In the financial year 2021 to 2022, $140 million USD was allocated to support vulnerable older persons through a program known as Inua Jamii Cash Transfer Program for older persons that has allowed senior citizens to engage in various economic activities. 2, the government of Kenya has also focused on adult and continuing education to empower older persons with basic skills and promote social change and lifelong learning. 3, the government of Kenya has created savings and credit services for and by older persons, such as Mbao Pension Plan, an informal sector pension scheme, and the Haba Haba initiative. These allow workers to contribute to their retirement without regard to age or income. 4, Kenya has established a national policy on older persons and aging 2018 with a comprehensive framework that facilitates the provision of reasonable care and assistance to older persons to participate in society and enjoy their rights and live in dignity. Excellencies, on the second priority, advancing health and well-being into old age, Kenya is implementing the Kenya Health Policy 2014 to 2030, which makes provision for achieving universal health coverage, UHC. Some of the key achievements Kenya has made towards achieving universal health coverage includes health insurance subsidies through targeting vulnerable groups. On the third priority, ensuring enabling and supporting aging, the Constitution of Kenya forbids age-based discrimination. This obligates the state to take measures to guarantee the rights of older persons to fully participate in the affairs in the society. They should live in dignity and respect and free from any abuse. As further evidence of the government's commitment to safeguarding the rights of older persons, in February 2022, Kenya ratified the protocol to the African Charter on the Human and People's Rights on the Rights of Older Persons in Africa. Distinguished delegates, in conclusion, Kenya will remain steadfast in its commitment to uplift and empower its older citizens, ensuring that they are fully respected and valued as active members of society. I thank you all.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Madam Minister of Kenya. I will now give the floor to Madam Doreen Mwamba, Minister of Community Development and Social Services of Zambia.
Thank you, Chairperson. Your Excellencies, current statistics for Zambia approximate the population older persons at 5.5%. Most of the older persons population is based in rural areas of the country, which is characterized mainly by poorer people than urban regions. This is 80% compared to the 20% respectively. This has resulted in a range of issues that affect older persons population in Zambia. To mitigate the challenges among the aging population, government developed the National Aging Policy in 2015, which signaled its commitment to protecting and promoting the rights of older persons, as well as improving their welfare. The policy was aligned with the Madrid Plan of Action of 2002, as well as the AU Policy Framework and Plan of Action on Aging. Following the expiration of the policy in 2020, government has an opportunity to further strengthen interventions around issues affecting older persons. In addition, government has continued to show commitment to aging issues through the commemoration of the International Day for Older Persons. Chairperson, in terms of healthcare services, Zambia health policy exempts persons aged 65 years and above from paying user fees. The government has also prioritized the payment of pension arrears for older persons that have retired from service and are due for pension payouts. Zambia is also promoting active aging through the provision of comprehensive social protection to facilitate access to essential services, safeguard their livelihood and income security, and reduce old age poverty. This not only promotes social inclusion for older persons, but also improves their wealth and dignity. Government recognizes the need for inclusive strategies and has assured that the aspirations of older people are addressed in various social protection program guidelines. These include social cash transfer program, social insurance schemes, which endeavors to prepare citizens for the unavoidable phenomenon of aging to ensure that all age with dignity and integrity. All in all, government is committed to addressing the issues of aging in a coordinated and comprehensive manner, as well as promote intergenerational solidarity and a society for all ages. I thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Madam Minister of Zambia. I will now give the floor to
of Labor and Social Protection de Azerbaijan. Señor Ministro, tiene...
Minister, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I thank, first of all, the distinguished panelists for excellent presentation and thought-provoking statements. I also join the panelists in sharing the concern on aging challenges and the need for effective and targeted measures that should be taken without any delay. Azerbaijan is a relatively young country, so aging is not a critical issue, but still we actively participated in the Fourth Review and Appraisal cycle for MIPAA, and we submitted our reports. And this 20 years, we believe, is a good track record for us to see our progress. And in this regard, we engaged the renowned famous expert from Czech Republic, Mr. Kuchera, Professor Kuchera, who delivered for us a demographic report for till 2050, and we identified that despite we were on a more or less positive side, but still we identified certain challenges for Azerbaijan, and we identified that just for these 20 years, the population aged 65 and over has already increased by 70%. So the share of this group increased from 6% to 8%, and we expect threefold increase by 2050. So this would reach by 21% by 2050. Therefore, we believe that we have to continue actively participate in international efforts, like we already participated in the Rome conference that was also emphasized by distinguished panelists Alfredo Ferrante. And on national level, we actually, it's one of the first initiatives in the region. We worked with United Nations Population Fund to generate for the first time in the country practice the active aging index. So that helped us to put our efforts in more systematic way and in more integrated approach, and also to see what are deliverables, tangible results should be attained. It also, this index helped us to raise the public awareness, because generally we have a demographic rise currently, so mostly aging issues is not on as a high note among the population. So this index helped us a lot to mitigate and to start the new efforts for the MIPAA implementation. Thank you very much.
Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much to the Honorable Minister of Azerbaijan. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Turkey, followed by the distinguished representative of Argentina. You have the floor.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd like to thank all panelists for their very valuable contributions. The Fourth Review and Appraisal cycle provided member states a unique opportunity to self-assess themselves, to identify where the countries stand on in terms of aging policies and measures, compare their progress and make plans for future challenges and opportunities related to aging, and to adapt to demographic change by reviewing the implementation of MIPAA during the last 20 years. In this context, Turkey prepared its national report along with other member states for the Fourth Review by referring the main actions and progress on 2017 Lisbon Declaration goals, its progress in the implementation of MIPAA over past 20 years, and contributions of aging-related policies to the implementation of the Agenda 2030. Within the last 5 years, Turkey has developed strategies to mainstream aging in all policy fields, specifically referring to the 10th and 11th development plans, including currently being drafted 12th development plan and the preparation of aging vision document. The priority approach of Turkey in the field of aging is to ensure that individuals go through the aging process within the framework of active and healthy aging without leaving anyone behind on the path of sustainable development. Ministry of Family and Social Services, which is the main public institution responsible for coordinating the work of determining policies and strategies at the national level for older persons, has continued to work towards mainstreaming aging and increasing the quality of life by ensuring that old persons enjoy their rights effectively in all areas, such as long-term care, health, lifelong learning, working life, and accessible environment in 2022, and these efforts will continue to be carried out more effectively in 2023. Distinguished guests, in the last 5 years, there has been emerging issues such as climate change, war, migration. These situations usually create fragile conditions for older persons. Just very recently, we experienced the devastating earthquakes and aftershocks in Turkey. We had to transfer thousands of older persons located in the affected provinces to safer places. We experienced firsthand that older persons are even more fragile in these harsh conditions of crisis. In this regard, I would like to draw attention regarding the review of MIPAA in terms of high vulnerability of older persons in the conditions of such crisis, how the MIPAA could be strengthened for the future in terms of crisis. Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much to the distinguished representative of Turkey. We have a new request from a minister, so we will be giving the floor to Portugal, followed by Argentina. The minister, Her Excellency, the Minister of Labour and Solidarity and Social Security of Portugal. Madam Minister, you have the floor.
Dear Chair, dear colleagues, it has been 20 years since in 2002 the United Nations adopted the Madrid International Plan of Action on Aging, MIPAA. It offered, as we all know, a bold new agenda for handling the issues of aging in the 21st century, focusing on 3 priority areas: older persons and development, advancing health and well-being into old age, and ensuring enabling and supported environments. We have come a long way since then, but there is still a very long road in our way, and we have to rush up. The COVID pandemic has exposed how fragile we are all and how we need to accelerate the changes that need to be made to guarantee adequate answers to actual and real problems that we all challenge and that we all face. The pandemic has disproportionately affected the elderly. Many have lost their jobs, many have lost their savings, and many have been forced to isolate themselves to protect themselves from the virus. This has also had a profound impact on mental and physical health and well-being. This has also given us all a special legitimacy to accelerate and implement different actions that do tackle concrete exclusion situations based on age that we face. It is critical that governments put in place comprehensive and mainstreaming policies that answer the challenges we face. We must prioritize new social answers that promote active and healthy life through all days of our lives. We must accelerate the implementation of new models to guarantee active and real participation and combat isolation, exclusion, and ageism. The path we have to walk is clear. Dear colleagues, the MIPAA provided a clear blueprint and assumed our global commitment, but 20 years after, we must accelerate. Let us work together to ensure that the elderly and all of us are not left behind, and that we are all given the resources and support we all need to have a concrete, decent life all our days of our life.
Doy las gracias.
Thank you very much to the Minister of Portugal. I'd now like to give the floor to the distinguished representative of Argentina, Ambassador Esquez. You have the floor. Thank you very much, sir. At the outset, my delegation wishes to convey our solidarity regarding towards Chile, our brother country, which is affected by wildfires. We hope that these can be tackled as soon as possible. Sir, I wish to thank the panelists for their presentations. This is a very important discussion on the progress and results of the Fourth Review and Appraisal of the Madrid Plan of Action on Aging. The promotion and protection of human rights of older persons has always been a priority of Argentina's. It is an honor for me and a great responsibility to be chairing the open-ended working group of the UN General Assembly group on this. My commitment to this open-ended working group on aging is unwavering. In a world where older persons are invisible, the open-ended working group on aging has a key role to play. It is the only entity of the UN system that specifically deals with matters related to the protection of the human rights of older persons. Accordingly, we welcome the holding of this panel in the context of social development in order to mainstream the agenda throughout the UN agencies and systems and to give visibility to the challenges faced by older persons throughout the world. We underscore that 4 out of every 7 member states have participated in the review and appraisal exercise. For the first time in the review and appraisal of the Madrid Plan of Action, all regions noted that all NGOs noted the importance of having an international legal framework for the full protection of the human rights of all older persons. This is to be within and among regions. This would be a significant landmark. We all know that the population aging is a universal phenomenon. By 2050, it is projected that the number of persons aged 60 and plus will be 64% higher than the number of young people. Young people today are the older persons of tomorrow. We have all suffered the devastating impact of COVID-19 and it's even worse for older persons. According to a 2022 report by DESA, the pandemic has directly or indirectly cost the lives of some 15 million persons in 24 months. That is 82% of these were older persons, in fact. There is a vital need to accelerate implementation of the Madrid Plan of Action. And here we firmly believe that developing an international legal instrument on the human rights of older persons would be complementary and strengthen the Madrid Plan of Action. To conclude, we have a question for the panelists. Last Monday, for the first time, an older person was a speaker at the opening session of this commission, and they said that young people today will be the older persons of tomorrow. In this respect, how can governments strengthen an intergenerational approach to ensure that persons of all ages, including young people, can be involved more actively and inclusively in the global agenda on aging? Thank you very much, and I apologize for going over the time limit. Thank you to the distinguished representative of Argentina. I now call on the representative of El Salvador.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you very much, sir. I wish to begin by conveying our solidarity and sincere condolences for the loss of life in Turkey and Syria owing to the earthquake of February 6th. We welcome the presentations made by panelists at this fourth review of MIPAA. This provides a clear opportunity for us to take stock of progress made in recent years in all the regions on the priority areas that were defined. That is older persons and development, fostering health and well-being in one's old age, creation of conducive environments. And as was mentioned, there are a total of 239 recommendations to tackle these matters. I'd like to quote Article 1 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It sets out that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. I'd also like to note the principle of universality of human rights as a cornerstone of international human rights law. And why did I mention this? That is because there are stereotypes and a negative view about aging. This leads to age-based discrimination. That is why intergenerational solidarity is needed, as panelists mentioned. Also, we see that aging determines, in many cases, the dependence and independence of persons. Aging sometimes is marked by a loss of autonomy or limited autonomy. And thirdly, working towards universality doesn't bring coverage for older persons when we talk about universal social health coverage, when we talk about universal social protection, when we talk about guaranteeing inclusive, equitable, and quality education, and promoting opportunities for lifelong learning and digital skills training. Next, to have inclusive societies, we need to accept the differences and demographic trends that we see within our own countries. These differences are in fact part of our rich human experience and shouldn't be a reason for segregation. As an international community, we have a debt to our older adults. We understand that the debate on the rights of older persons can be a bit complex to tackle when the demographic dividend is different in the different regions, as the panelists noted. However, given current demographic trends, it is vital to create a new situation where the aging of the population can be transformed into a driver of development. For example, Latin America and the Caribbean is seeing a speedy population aging. In 2050, there will be 2.1 more older persons than in 2022. The panelists mentioned the importance of collecting data reflecting states' efforts on dealing with the life cycle of persons. With this MIPAA review, we must change the narrative that older persons are only they benefit from social programs. They have rights. Now, more than 20 years after the adoption of MIPAA, we believe we must start drafting a specific multilateral legal instrument. This must have a broad and comprehensive approach and a binding nature to promote and protect the rights and dignity of older persons. The aim is to strengthen the international protection of older persons and to reduce the scattered legislation we see today. As the Secretary General said in his report for this session of the Commission, this international legal instrument would complement and strengthen MIPAA. It would be vital for promoting and protecting the rights and dignity of older adults. Our region, Latin America, is pioneering in having a legally binding instrument. We have our Inter-American Convention on the Protection of the Human Rights of Older Persons. This is an instrument that standardizes guarantees as no other binding international instrument had considered before. Lastly, and I apologize for taking more time, old age should never be a cause or an excuse to limit autonomy or to breach or undermine the dignity of older persons. We believe, therefore, it is vital to provide to current and future generations of older persons an opportunity to enjoy aging well. Age should not be a limitation for enjoying their rights, nor an unsurmountable obstacle to continue to exercise their fundamental freedoms. Here, as states, we have a great responsibility in giving visibility to older persons in the various processes in the UN. For example, how can we speak of the Summit of the Future if we overlook older persons? How can we take into account the reality of this demographic trend and ensure that young people will be addressed as the older persons of the future? Thank you, El Salvador. If I may, I would remind delegations to please keep to the time limits of 3 minutes so that we can hear from as many persons as possible from delegations and civil society, and to maintain this interactive discussion. I'd like to give the floor to Cuba, followed by Canada. Cuba, please.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you to the panelists for sharing their experiences on regional consultations at the end of last year. I have a few comments to make and then a question. Clearly, the matter of aging involves all persons now and in the future. The International Plan of Action of Madrid on Aging that set out fundamental steps at the time with modern and advanced proposals for protection the rights of older persons. And now there are gaps in development in countries and between countries, and we need to take action on matters of international cooperation, transfer of resources, technology, and capacity. In Latin America and the Caribbean, Cuba is one of the countries that has an older population. 21.3% of our total population was made up of older persons, and this will increase significantly. We are implementing a national plan for the protection of older persons. We include them in decision-making and policies of the country. Internationally, we are supporting and closely following the development of a legal international instrument that could be binding and would strengthen the Madrid process and strengthen the rights of older persons. My government's aim, nationally and internationally, is to tackle the obstacles, that is the blockade, the economic and financial blockade against Cuba that has been imposed for more than 60 years. This has significantly impacted older persons. And during consultations in Santiago, we touched on this, and we hope this can be reflected in our state declaration for all countries in the region. We also wanted to share with panelists and colleagues here that we'd like to pose a question on experiences in regional consultations. We'd like to hear about the impact that these coercive unilateral measures have had on the true and meaningful, effective protection of the rights of older persons. Thank you.
Doy las gracias.
Thank you, Cuba. We now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Canada. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the panelists this morning. And I also want to, Excellencies, thank you for being all here. I had the privilege as a young officer to be the Canadian lead negotiator at the Madrid conference for the Plan of Action and Declaration, and it's a great privilege for me to be here today. As Canadians, we live longer, even though we're not getting younger. And first speaker reminded us well the growing number of older persons in a rapid speed. It was quite interesting to hear from our second speaker the multiple challenges with, I would say, startling numbers and statistics. I want to thank our third speaker for reminding us the importance of access to social safety network or social safety net, and the connection that is between human rights and certainly this issue of aging. Our fourth speaker really reminded us how the Madrid Plan of Action is still relevant to all of us, and that it must continue to inform our policy, which is quite reassuring for me since I was there in Madrid for the long hours of negotiation in the night. And I can reassure you, there were many midnight sessions. But also that the multiple reviews keeps us in check, make sure that we are keeping on track. I was very pleased to hear the fifth speaker to the importance of mainstreaming aging in all our policies, and certainly looking at particularly older women and their particular needs. You told us that it's a challenge that we all share. I should say it's maybe a reality that we all share, since I'm not getting younger, even though I try to pretend every day that I'm getting younger. Our six speakers told us that we should all aim for our old age as being secure and contributing to the development of the world. And I think that's really an important reminder, because our last speaker noted some of the big challenge that we have, the social divide, growing with digital divide, but also making sure that the rights of older persons, as we look at the pandemic, the war, the daily lives, is still very much overlooked, as she said. So going back to our keynote speaker, I may want to ask ourselves, what are we missing as the international community? Where are we missing the mark? And I would be interested to give a chance to our panelists to dwell a little bit more in this space rather than reporting only to the extraordinary work that was done on those key commissions. But, you know, we need to change the discourse, he said, change the narrative and look at the opportunities for well-being of seniors, but also in each of our countries, how they contribute to our future prosperity. They have a wealth of knowledge. I often say they're my angels, but they remain key pillars of our society. And so maybe that's the thought that we all need to keep. Thank you.
Doy las gracias.
Thank you to the distinguished representative of Canada for her statement. We still have a long list of member states and NGOs requesting the floor. So please, panelists, could you take note of the questions and comments being made, and we will then give the floor to each and every one of you to comment on what we've heard. Thank you very much. Now we have the distinguished representative of Finland, followed by the distinguished representative of Spain.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Vappu Taipale, Finnish delegation and representing of NGOs here. And at first, I would like to thank the panel and the keynote speaker. That has been an excellent opportunity of learning and understanding better this issue. And especially I would like to thank Professor Mollenkopf, because you just reminded us about the consequences, the mental consequences and the consequences for children and future generations of the crisis and the wars which are just now going on. We can't let people down. Actually, I have a question. I'm an old person myself. I'm representing an extremely heterogeneous group of people, from 60 years old to 100 years old and forward. What do you expect us? What will be the share of us, older people, our NGOs, and all our groups? What is the responsibility of to speak out, to be demanding, to show our resources? And what do you recommend to us? Thank you.
Muchas gracias a la...
Thank you very much to the distinguished representative of Finland. I now give the floor to Spain. Good morning. Thank you very much for this opportunity to speak after hearing the ideas conveyed here on the panel. And especially as the plan of action has the name Madrid, which is in Spain. Since 2002, with the adoption of the Madrid Plan and at the second Global Assembly on Aging, Spain ever since has shown its interest in contributing to the work of the UN and its commitment to championing the rights of older persons. In 2007, we in León held a conference on aging of UNESE, and in 2008, we created with others a working group on aging of UNESE. Now, 20 years later, we see how the resolution on the Fourth Review and Appraisal of the Madrid Plan of Action highlights all of the work done to date. It also shows important challenges before us in order to guarantee the rights and dignity of older persons, as panelists have expressed this morning. Their economic and social rights especially are affected, as well as their right to social services, promoting their personal autonomy, the provision of quality care, and attention to situations of dependency, and guaranteeing their full participation in social environments. Those are all important. In this respect, Spain has a range of policies in line with the MIPAA spirit, but we also still have challenges. We are reforming the model of long-term care, improving the labor situation and recognizing the social recognition of caregivers, combating age-based discrimination, ensuring the participation of older persons in all areas of society, and ensuring that we can all realize our projects for our lives, independent, regardless of our age. Spain has a broad-based strategy. First, in 2021, we had a crash plan on a system for autonomy addressing care and dependency. We have increased our budget by 600 million euros annually, bringing this to a total of 1.8 million euros injected in the past 3 years. Secondly, Spain has focused on a new care economy and for employment policies within a plan for recovery, transformation, and resilience. And we also have a roadmap for modernizing the Spanish economy. Spain is also deploying a broad range of measures to ensure quality care, promoting integration, and ensuring that older persons can develop their life plans in their environments. Spain also has pro-older person policies within the UN context and in coordination with the European Union. We will continue these in the future through setting out domestic policies of MIPAA, and we hope this can also lead to a new plan of action that can be adopted at a possible third Global Assembly on Aging. Thank you. Thank you to Spain. I now call on the distinguished representative of Morocco.
Honorable Chair, Excellencies, distinguished delegates. At the outset, I would like to thank the distinguished panelists for their fruitful and comprehensive presentations. This panel is timely as we're going through a recovery phase from unprecedented pandemic that is having devastating and multifaceted impacts on the lives, well-being, and the rights of older persons. The impact adds to the already existing multiple and intersecting forms of discrimination and violence experienced by older persons around the world, which aggravate their vulnerabilities. I would like to recall here that Morocco, together with Argentina, Austria, Canada, Chile, El Salvador, and Slovenia, took the initiative to issue a joint statement to strongly support the appeal by the Secretary General to promote responses to the pandemic based on the respect of the rights and dignity of older people, as well as global solidarity. The joint statement, supported by at least 146 member states, expressed, namely, our deep concern regarding the devastating impact the COVID-19 pandemic is having on the lives of older persons. It also underlined our full commitment to promoting and respecting the dignity of the rights of the older people and mitigating the negative impacts on their health, lives, and well-being during and after the COVID-19 pandemic. It is worth underlining that the policy brief underlined that the older person are at a significantly higher risk of mortality and severe disease following infections, with those over 80 years old dying at 5 times the average rate. The number by itself is unacceptable, alarming, and calls for an urgent, concrete, and durable action. Furthermore, older persons still face discrimination, violence, and abuse in many parts of the world, without any international legal instrument that specifically protect their own human rights. This is why there is an urgent need to decide on the question of international legal framework that guarantees the exercise by older persons of all human rights and fundamental freedoms on an equal basis with other segments of the society. Older persons' respect and protection is something that should unite us all. We need to ensure it throughout international mechanism, whether throughout a convention or another framework. We have to find a way out that we would respond to the ultimate purpose of protecting the specific needs and rights of persons with disabilities. Because meanwhile, older persons cannot wait and their requests are valid. I thank you, Mr. Chair.
Agradezco.
I thank the distinguished representative of Morocco for his statement and now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Ukraine, followed by Malaysia. You have the floor.
Dear Chairman, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the progressive aging of the population and its consequences is one of the most pressing socio-demographic challenges for modern Ukraine. This is especially acute for Ukraine in the context of the full-scale war of the Ukrainian Federation against our country. The war not only significantly increases the share of the elderly population in Ukraine, but also poses new challenges and threats to their lives. Although Ukraine, despite the war, continues to pay pensions in full and even increase them with the help of partner countries, thank you for that, Russian aggression has significantly worsened the situation of older people. Despite the difficult conditions, the government, with the support of our partners, was able to organize evacuation flights and social transportation for people living in areas that are often under fire or close to the warfare zones. However, the elderly mostly refuse to leave, and they remain in the areas where hostilities are taking place. Often, these are people with limited mobility and disabilities who, due to constant shelling and their health condition, are very difficult to evacuate. In fact, these citizens are left alone, without the care of the family, who were forced to leave in order to protect their lives. Russia is deliberately destroying social infrastructure and power plants, which is a critical situation in winter, especially when the temperature can drop to -20 Celsius degrees. Under such circumstances, older people are deprived of access to heat and basic needs. As of today, there are more than 10 million pensioners in Ukraine, and millions of people have lost their jobs, which puts them at risk of not having the required work experience to receive a pension. To solve this problem, we passed a law and developed a digital tool for making pension contribution without reference to official employment, and at the expense of charitable funds and other people's funds. This opens us completely new opportunities to protect people who have lost their jobs or work in the informal sector. The war is forcing us to create new tools that other countries may need to improve the quality of life of older people. Dear participants of the discussion, we are building a vision of the country's development with human well-being at its center. On behalf of Ukraine, I sincerely thank you. Thank the international community for supporting Ukraine, and call for strengthening joint efforts for the sake of victory and development of humanity. Thank you.
Doy las gracias.
Thank you to the distinguished representative of Ukraine. I now call on the distinguished representative of Malaysia.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Malaysia reaffirms the key role of the Madrid International Plan of Action on Aging MIPAA towards building a society for all ages. While the population of Malaysia is relatively young as compared to those in developed countries, changes in the age structure due to infertility decline and increased longevity have contributed towards an aging population domestically. It is estimated by 2030, Malaysia will be an aging nation with older persons making up more than 15% of our population. In response, the government has formulated a national policy for older persons and plan of action for older persons focusing on the 3 priority areas outlined in MIPAA to address the challenges of an aging population as well as the needs of older persons in an effective and efficient manner. The policy recognizes older persons as citizens with varying backgrounds and experiences entitled to enjoy comfortable and respected lives and contribute to the development of the nation. Among strategies implemented in this regard, including mainstreaming aging in our national developmental agenda, as well as strengthening human governance and legislation pertaining to older persons. In an effort to better protect the rights of older persons, the government has implemented a number of initiatives encompassing social protection, home and health facilities, care services for older persons, as well as financial assistance to assist the elderly poor. Cognizant of this importance of lifelong learning opportunities to promote active and productive older persons, the government has introduced lifelong activities that facilitate the sharing of life experiences and building of knowledge, as well as the acquisition of new skills in later life. Mr. Chair, Malaysia supports the development of an international legal instrument to accelerate actions vis-à-vis the protection of the rights of older persons, which is also featured in the Secretary General's report on the Fourth Review and Appraisal of MIPAA. We have participated actively in the ongoing open-ended working group on aging and look forward to advancing discussion on this important issue during the upcoming session of the OEWG in April this year. Malaysia appreciates the panelists for sharing their presentations. We take note of the many actionable solutions that have been discussed and will continue to promote the rights of older persons. Our question to the panelists is, what are some promising practices that could be adopted to further create better understanding and coordination of the varying roles of various agencies such as health, welfare, education, and justice in response to the challenges of aging? Thank you.
I thank the representative of Malaysia and now give the floor to the NGO, International Federation on Aging.
Tiene usted la palabra. Por favor, si podemos darle.
Please, if we could give the NGO 1 the floor, please. Microphone to NGO 1.
Press? Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much for this very important discussion. First, I want to assure everyone in this room that longevity is to be celebrated, not to be feared or ignored. Age discrimination has been addressed in all previous reviews of MIPAA, and yet it continues.
Social protection and social security have been found inadequate in all reviews of MIPAA. Healthcare services have been found insufficient in all reviews of MIPAA. We talk about poverty in all reviews of MIPAA. We talk about violence and abuse in all reviews. We talk about the need for more data. We have all aged 20 years since MIPAA's adoption. MIPAA talked about building a society for all ages. Which part of all ages do governments not understand? I ask the panelists, if a convention to protect the rights of older persons would complement and reinforce MIPAA, as noted in paragraph 74 of the review findings, what, in your views, is stopping governments to move forward on a convention that would complement and reinforce MIPAA? Thank you.
Agradezco.
I thank the representative of IFA, International Federation of Aging, and now call on the representative of ECLAC. You have the floor.
Can we give the floor to ECLAC, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And thanks to all panelists for the excellent interventions and sharing their knowledge and experience. In the Latin America and the Caribbean region, as the ambassador of Chile mentioned in her remarks, we had a very engaging review of MIPAA last December at ECLAC headquarters. 29 member countries and 9 agencies, funds, and programs of the UN system participated, and more than 120 representatives of civil society organizations participated in the 5th Regional Intergovernmental Conference on Aging and the Rights of Older Persons. The hybrid format allowed for the participation of more than 2,600 people. One demand we received from civil society in Latin America and the Caribbean, as well as from several governments, is to foster the adoption of a legally binding instrument at the global level, considering that the region has already achieved the adoption in 2015 in the framework of the Organization of American States of the legally binding instrument, the Inter-American Convention on the Protection of Human Rights of Older Persons. The convention has been ratified by 10 countries of the region. In a regional context, which is characterized by very high inequalities and overlapping crises, obviously we need to make progress on the 3 priority areas of MIPAA, as well as on emerging issues like long-term care or palliative care. To this regard, I would like to ask the panelists, one, as MIPAA was adopted 2 decades ago, which areas do you think are missing or need to be strengthened in policy terms? And 2, very much in line with the last intervention, what synergies do you consider exist between MIPAA and the adoption of a legally binding instrument, or in other words, would a legally binding instrument reinforce the goals of MIPAA? Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much to the representative of the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean. I now call on the representative of AARP.
Usted la palabra.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the panelists. For those not familiar with AARP, we are the largest non-profit, non-partisan organization in the United States with 38 million members. These are persons over the age of 50, and we work to improve the quality of life for all as we age. I want to pick up on some of the points that were raised by the keynote, by our good friend Dr. Amkaro, by Canada, by Finland, on attitudes and perceptions of older persons. Older persons don't yield dividends. Older persons are vulnerable. There are these negative ageist attitudes that are prevalent even among maybe people in this room, in comments that we make, even about ourselves. We can be ageist. So let me just tell you what we have in terms of data from AARP's Longevity Economy Outlook in the US that show that people 50 and older contribute $8.3 trillion to the economy. That is expected to triple to $28.2 trillion by 2050. If this were a country, it would be the third largest economy in the world, behind the United States and China. The economic activity of people 50 plus supports 88.6 million jobs in the United States, and the numbers will only increase as millennials move into their 50s in about 10 years. So let's not look at age as this static number. We are aging, as my colleagues have said, as we sit here. You want to know about economics, you want to know about data. Let's look at the cost of ageism. Age discrimination in the US economy accounted for $850 billion in lost gross domestic product in 2018, according to a study from AARP. So my question to all of you, member states, is when are you going to shift the narrative and stop talking about older persons being a drain on the economy? When are you going to realize the value add of older persons to societies if we are all fortunate enough to age and contribute? Thank you.
Doy las gracias.
Thank you very much to the representative of AARP. Participants, I'd like to go back to the list, but first I'd like to give the floor to the permanent representative of Chile here. You have to leave in a few minutes, so we would welcome any observations you might have on what we've heard here. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much, Chair, for giving me the opportunity. I apologize, but I have to catch a train, and I need to be able to leave. And as Vice Chair of ECOSOC. So I had to shift things around. But I wanted to thank each and every one of you for your contributions. Once again, as I mentioned, Chile is a country that is fully committed to addressing the need of having a binding legal instrument internationally, enabling states to make resolute progress in adopting public policies guaranteeing the full implementation and guarantees of the rights of older persons. We've heard various observations saying that the Plan of Action of Madrid is vital to implement, that it has had a focus on development. We believe that is valuable and necessary. We also understand that this vision must be complemented with one of the protection and promotion of human rights. And this requires, therefore, a legal binding instrument to ensure those rights are guaranteed. I'd also like to mention what was noted on expectations one might have on the activity and participation of civil society. In Chile, we believe that building sustainable public policy must be accompanied by the involvement visions of civil society. To build sustainable political policy, public policies, we need input from civil society. And so there was a question from Finland. We need to continue to involve citizens in addressing in civil society with regard to states obligation to fulfill obligations under instruments to ensure mechanisms that have greater transparency for civil society. This requires greater involvement. Lastly, there's a cultural aspect on how we can transform social cultural norms, on mindsets vis-a-vis the older population. And this requires an intergenerational debate that is ongoing, as we heard from the ambassador of Argentina. This requires the involvement of all throughout the life cycle in dealing with public policies for older persons. So we will be paying attention to this in the future. We do need greater involvement and methodology of work, intergenerational, in designing and implementing public policies for older populations. Lastly, thank you to the ambassador of Argentina for her solidarity conveyed in dealing with our forest fires in the country. Older persons have had to flee their homes to be evacuated because of these fires. So everything is interlinked. When we talk about social protection, we're addressing all of these aspects affecting the lives of persons. Thank you very much for allowing me to participate here, and I apologize for having to leave this. Thank you very much, Madam, for being in this high-level panel. We have two last requests for the floor. We can only hear two more speakers, and then we will go back to our panelists to hear their concluding remarks. I'd like to call on the representative of the economic and the ESCAP.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, we would like to express our gratitude to all the panelists, and in particular to the chair of the Asia Pacific Review of MIPAA, Her Excellency Aishat Mohammed Didi, for so eloquently presenting the outcomes of the regional reviews. As stated by the Minister, the Asia Pacific region is experiencing population aging at an unprecedented pace. By 2050, 1 in 4 persons, or some 1.3 billion people, are projected to be older, representing 63% of the global total of older persons. 1 in 7 people in the world will be an older person from Asia and the Pacific. Therefore, what happens to older persons in the Asia-Pacific region will shape trends at the global level. Mr. Chair, the fourth review of an appraisal of MIPAA in Asia-Pacific indicated that many countries have come far in addressing issues related to population aging, but many challenges remain. The development and implementation of legislation focusing on older persons, misconception and stereotypes about population aging and older persons, lack of data and human resources were highlighted as challenges. However, I would like to focus on one specific issue, which is I want both as a question and as a comment and a question to the panelists, is how do we avoid the negative portrayal of older persons, as was also mentioned by my colleagues from civil society and especially AARP. We would like to highlight that population aging is an achievement that has been attained through increased longevity and falling fertility rates due to extension of reproductive health services. It's an evolution of society that we have to adjust to, manage, and draw the many benefits and opportunities from. Therefore, the usage of words such as crisis, burden, cost, disaster to describe population aging are something that should be best avoided, and I'm sure all of us here would agree with that. Older persons have much to offer as equal and valuable members of society, and the contributions need to be acknowledged. So what do we put in place to avoid, and how do we address negative stereotypes when we see it, and how do we ourselves program ourselves to avoid such negative stereotypes? So that is my question to the panel. Mr. Chair, I conclude by reaffirming ESCAP's commitment to member states and civil society partners to support implementation of MIPAA in our region. Thank you, sir.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much to the representative of ESCAP for his statement. I now call on the organization People Empowering People Africa, PEP.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and with due respect to protocols. The way we speak here today, I feel as if though tomorrow we will not get older. I'm afraid the way we address older people here. I'll give you an overview of something I have done myself. I feel a little bit guilty with. My son lived with my grandfather, that's the great-grandfather, in Africa, Cameroon, in the northwest region, some 22,000 kilometers away from here. I communicate to my grandfather through my son because he cannot use the phone, the telephone, which is more accessible, easier for communication. There's a bridge between myself and my grandfather, so he communicates more to my son to talk to me. I feel there's an isolation of the digital world with the older generation. Of course, my son will pick the phone sometimes, tell me, hey, grandpa does not understand. I feel sad. Sometimes we will laugh over it. It's not funny, but it is something we need to address. How can we develop programs that are more engaging with them using the opportunity of the digitalizations? And also, I feel that I'm robbing him because he's doing what we call there's an unpaid care with the older people. At this time, they need rest, but he's still taking care of my son. I think we have to look at how do we pay them that as that leverage as well. And we are talking about 22 years or 20 years of the Madrid Plan of Action. What have been achieved in terms of indicators and where, who, where, how were civil society engaged in the process to complement the government actions in the Madrid Plan of Actions? And how is the Madrid Plan, what are the means, the mechanisms put in place to popularize the Madrid Plan of Action, so much so that my grandfather in Kikakilaki, in my subdivision in Donga Bantu region in Cameroon, understands that plan? Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much to the representative of PEP Africa. I now call on International Network for the Prevention of Elder Abuse.
Tiene usted la palabra.
You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Poverty is a persistent intergenerational issue and a risk factor for violence, abuse, and neglect, which largely affects women, older women, and widows. If we are determined to keep older persons out of poverty, if we intend to leave no one behind, if we pledge to protect the rights of all people of all ages, including those over 60, if we say we want everyone to lead a life of dignity, do you panelists not agree that government ensures the following: that older persons do not become among the poorest of the poor, that they have adequate social protection, that they don't suffer from malnutrition, that they have access to health services, preventive medicines and vaccines, that they're provided with lifelong learning opportunities to ensure that they remain independent and autonomous? Older women do not suffer from any kind of discrimination, and that older persons are not deprived of employment opportunities because of their age. Older persons are not forgotten when making cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. If MIPAA has not been a sufficient catalyst for improving the lives of older persons, what about compliance with the SDGs? All of them that were involved in the issues I raised. So I ask you, how can a binding international instrument complement and strengthen MIPAA and move us towards a compliance with the SDGs to advance the human rights of all persons of all ages? Thank you.
Doy las gracias.
Thank you very much to the representative of IMPAIR. Thank you to all for your statements. We will now return to our panelists for concluding observations. I would appreciate it if you could stick to 3 minutes so that all panelists can have the opportunity. We will start with Her Excellency Ms. Mohamed Didi, Minister of Gender and Social Affairs of the Maldives.
Thank you so much, Chair. Listening to each and every esteemed member who has spoken today, at the beginning I said today, for me, it's been always learning from each other, and until we continue to learn from each other, a lot of the questions that were raised will not be answered. I would like to focus a little bit on the questions that was asked by our distinguished guests, from representatives from Canada and Finland. What are we missing? How do we change the narrative? And what will be the share of us? What would be the responsibility? What would we recommend? I would first like to state one of the recommendations that came from the Fourth Review in Bangkok, and that was involve older persons and their organizations in a meaningful and participatory way in lawmaking and policy-making processes. Let not the NGOs be one side, let not the governments be another side. We have to work together. And we have to work together in a meaningful and participatory way to bring about change in law and policy-making processes. We have to recognize them as developmental actors, especially the people who we call the aged society. They are the people with the wisdom, they are the people with the knowledge, they are the people, if we can respect them enough, who would give us the direction as developmental actors in our way forward. So that is one point I would like to emphasize from our regional discussions. But I would also like to highlight that the legal frameworks in many of our countries in our region, I acknowledge that they are insufficient to protect the rights of older persons. And a convention on the protects of the rights of older persons would definitely give a framework for national legislation, and especially the allocation of budgetary resources. And it would also further encourage member states to align their national legislation with the convention to meet international commitments and to have legislation in line with global standards. In conclusion, I would like to give a few examples of how population aging affects all aspects of society and must be included in upcoming key initiatives. All these points also come from our discussions in Bangkok, from the 30 countries that participated. One is about climate change. We did not talk about climate change 20 years ago. I come from the Maldives, and I cannot leave any meeting or any conference without mentioning this word, because it affects us. I know we might say it's one of the global and regional mega trends, but we need to discuss aging in connection with climate change. Not only are older persons among the most vulnerable affected by climate change, but we have to recognize that they are also agents of climate action. For example, if I refer to the Maldives, the older persons have a wealth of traditional knowledge on the use of natural resources. They know the signs of a natural disaster. They have traditional coping mechanisms. They can play a role in promoting sustainable lifestyles, and they can be part of that climate action. Any future summit, when we talk about the summit of the future, for example, it has to address climate change. It must therefore include older persons and the wisdom that comes with them. Another area I would like to mention is population aging and gender equality. It's very closely related. As Minister of Gender, Family and Social Services in the Maldives, I would like again to recommend that the Summit of the Future to address the situation of older women. First, they often live longer than men in our part of the world, but are less likely to enjoy the benefits of social protection, as some have mentioned here. Second, in Asia and the Pacific, caregiving is perceived as a responsibility of the women. They often give up work to care for family members, starting from the children and continuing to their parents who become aged. Also, with fertility declining in Asia and the Pacific, family sizes are shrinking and people are moving to cities. We have to ensure that women will be able to continue to work and have social protection throughout their lives. I would like to conclude by saying that any viable future must build upon the needs and lived experiences of all generations, and the needs, experience, and wisdom of older persons must be integrated into our future initiatives. Thank you very much.
Doy las gracias.
Thank you to Her Excellency, the Minister of the Maldives. I now give the floor to Mr. Megdadi, Secretary General of the Council of Family Affairs of Jordan. Your concluding statement, please.
Shukran.
Thank you. I think that the question of elderly people, whether there is a divergence between states, as we've heard today. Well, today we've heard that there are a series of shared issues at the regional level and between regions and between states too. The question of elderly people is not always considered by political decision makers, because even though this is a shared issue, older persons often need care, and again, this is a shared issue. I'd like to reiterate once again that there is interest in an international convention on older persons, and this is positive, beneficial interest, and it could respond to several questions that we've heard today. For example, we can look at the Convention on the Rights of the Child and CEDAW. These required the role of civil society and of older persons so that these people can control governmental measures and to ensure that their rights are guaranteed. I underscored the importance of the rights of older persons. When we look at this issue, we'll reiterate the issue of health care and pensions. I think that we need to speak about the concept of development, healthcare issues, the quality of health, pensions, as well as infrastructure that is appropriate, as well as public transport. These are key issues. And yet at present, older persons need these essential services. But they also need interest. They need to be seen as a stakeholder in the development process. This convention could contribute to achieving change when it comes to development. And we must encourage this. If we do not work on a participatory basis at the local level, then we will continue these discussions in a way that is totally theoretical. We need to work at the local and national levels. That's urgent. There are shared issues between governments, the public sector, and civil society, and these are multidisciplinary questions and issues. All stakeholders in local and national teams should be able to participate. They should be able to participate in promoting the issue of older persons, and we need to work in a participatory manner rather than a theoretical manner. We need a practical approach. An international convention on older persons would be a tool. It's a tool for everybody who is interested in this issue to continue development and to benefit from the experiences of different countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the representative of Jordan. Please, panelists, let us try to stay within the 3-minute time limit so that we all have a chance to speak. I now give the floor to Ms. Emma Momokaro, Director General of the National Senior Citizen Center, Nigeria.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. There are questions here that indeed are thought-provoking. And should we be able to answer these questions, I think we will be able to accelerate the implementation of MIPAA and strengthen the rights of older people. The question from the representative of Canada and Finland, she asked a question. She said, so what did we miss? And then another person asked, which areas are missing and needs to be strengthened in MIPAA? And there was a question on, would a legally binding instrument reinforce MIPAA? And then somebody asked, what should be the role of older persons? What should be their contribution? And then somebody talked about the vacuum, the gaps, isolation, and then that divide between generations and then technology. I reiterate again that MIPAA is a very relevant policy document. MIPAA has brought a holistic view of aging and a perspective of aging that, if adopted and implemented, it will really include older people in development. However, what for me is missing in MIPAA, and Nigeria is an example because of what we are doing now, is a strategic roadmap. Because when you talk about a holistic approach to aging, and you talk about an intergenerational approach, and you talk about a life course approach, you are talking about a sector-wide where you have to bring in all stakeholders, different categories of stakeholders, ministries, agencies, departments. So the question is, what is that strategic roadmap? What is that strategic pathway? How are you going to bring them and bring them consistently? What is it that will compel them as partners and collaborators to indeed be committed to mainstreaming aging? There are two pathways. Aging mainstreaming based on strong partnerships and collaborations, and the other one will be creating new opportunities that never existed before, because for so long, older persons were excluded. Now they have come in. So there are so many initiatives that should have been, that was not. So now it is for MIPAA to develop a strategic roadmap, some kind of framework, strategic pathways to doing this and doing that, and then develop a monitoring and evaluation tool, because MIPAA does not have monitoring and evaluation tool that people can use locally to monitor. And then, of course, it is very important to have the legal framework, because where you have policy that is not complemented, is not legislated, then it can suffer, any political cycle It's at the whims and caprices of any politician that comes in. So MIPAA needs a legal backing, MIPAA needs a strategic framework, and MIPAA needs strong partnerships, collaboration, financing, and data. Thank you very much.
Agradezco a la señora.
Thank you, Ms. Omokaro, for your concluding observations. I now give the floor to Mr. Alfredo Ferrante for his observations.
Thank you, Chair. Very, very quickly, we are at the end of our day. I want to thank everyone for the really incredible inputs today. I'm going home really full of new ideas. You know, someone told me once that our societies are tailored for young, healthy males. That's true to some extent. Just let's think about our cities. Are they fit for everyone? Some are, many of them are not. So what we need, I think at the end of the day, it's really a cultural paradigm shift to change our societies, to change our world. It's not an easy task. We need political commitments. We need push for NGOs to give ideas, to give inputs. And just to sum up, we need, I told this before, we need mainstreaming in our daily policies, in all policies, and this is what MIPAA told us to do. We need to strive and continue to do so. Thank you so much.
Doy las gracias.
Thank you, Mr. Ferrante, for those conclusions. I now give the floor to Ms. Osero Agengo for her remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I have 3 quick points in conclusion that are kind of interlinked and which answer some of the questions that have been raised. The first one is on the responsibility of older people. I'd said before that older people have capabilities and must be included in development, but I think we need to actively integrate the issues of older people in all aspects of life, because that way then, if we're looking at the development goals, we're not going to achieve development if we leave a critical component of the population behind. The second point is around the intergenerational dialogues or engagements. We have to move away from having this as a buzzword. They have to be meaningful. And one of the speakers spoke about the wisdom of the older people. Let's bring the energy of the youth and the wisdom of the older people together so that we then leverage on technology that the younger people have to create much needed awareness on issues of older people, including the MIPAA. And again, young people are older people in waiting. If we do nothing to address the problems such as ageism that older people are facing today, then younger people are going to face ageism when they become older. And then finally, human rights are indivisible, they're interdependent. And I want to add that human rights have no sell-by date. So if we're taking care of the rights of children, the rights of women, the rights of different sections of the population, why do we stop when we get to the older ages? So we have to continue protecting our rights as we age, because we've heard a lot about longevity and a life course approach. Aging is a process, it's not an event, and so we cannot treat older people as having or old age as an event. So we have to deal with the rights of older people from a continuing perspective. And for that reason, then, we have to make sure that even though the MIPAA reporting is voluntary, we have to integrate the issues of older people in other aspects of human rights so that then the reporting is done as a matter of course. The MIPAA process needs to be strengthened, but there are gaps, and we've spoken about them since morning, and we have an opportunity to have a convention that will then protect the rights of older people in a way that we can create some level of accountability by governments and by us as the citizens of these governments. So that's where I'll conclude.
Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much. And to conclude, lastly, I'll give the floor now to Ms. Molenkov for her concluding observations.
Well, it's impossible to answer to so many questions in 3 minutes. So I try to focus on just a few of them and try to combine the different ones because, as you said already, Carol, they are interlinked. Most of all the issues are interlinked. I think that MIPAA has to be further developed in different dimensions. Otherwise, it will not continue to form a viable basis for political action. A first dimension concerns the content. That is, the issues that need to be addressed. I have named a few in my statements, for instance, the profound changes of the environments for aging. They are often forgotten. Most of the political strategies and measures are focusing on improving the conditions for health or for pensions or these aspects that are, of course, very fundamental, but aging takes place in a certain environment, and these environments differ very much between regions, between urban and rural areas, between countries, between everywhere, everything. So these conditions have to be considered when we plan measures. And of course, older persons have to be included when we think about what has to be improved and what has to be considered. And I think that this would also be a way to prevent the negative image of aging. Because if governments or any organizations see how older people can contribute, they will no longer be regarded as a bit stupid, a bit frail, a bit ill, a bit taking too much time, and so on. But instead, it will be seen and proven how important they are to improve the political measures. Otherwise, the measures will not be accepted and taken as something which is really useful, and even the population, not just the older population, but all generations will have the impression that policy is doing something on a desk, but without grasping what's the real world of young and middle and old generations. So another dimension is the empirical basis. We need a sound empirical basis, good data. We have repeated this years and years. And there are endeavors. I relate here to the Titchfield group, and I think such kind of endeavors must be reinforced and promoted so that we can get a sound empirical basis for policy decisions. And of course, here as well, older persons have to be included. And the final dimension is about accompanying and reinforcing measures to ensure that the actual implementation of any new issues and policy commitments will be adopted and implemented. And in view of the burning problems worldwide and the huge differences between regions, We urgently need measures that apply and work worldwide. And in the case of protecting older persons and their rights, this can only be an internationally binding instrument, such as a convention on the protection of older persons' rights. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to all panelists, to all participants, attendants of this panel, for really an inspiring and exciting discussion. I believe a well-deserved panel of this 20th anniversary of MIPAA, of the Madrid International Plan of Action on Aging. I would like to conclude by saying that discussions today highlighted that as member states look to accelerate the implementation of the existing UN agreements, including the SDGs and the Summit of the Future, it is crucial to take into account the anticipated demographic trends. It was also discussed how there is a need ahead, in light of the challenges that lie ahead and in our future, that governments further link the questions of aging as agreed in MIPAA 20 years ago to other frameworks of social and economic development and human rights, and how the discussion around the legally binding instrument advancing towards that lies in the center of furthering mainstreaming aging and the rights of older persons in our policies. I would like to quote from MIPAA itself what our governments agreed in Madrid, back in Madrid. I quote, "Population aging is a universal force that has the power to shape the future as much as globalization. It is essential to recognize the ability of older persons to contribute to society by taking the lead not only in their own betterment, but also in that of society as a whole. Forward thinking calls us to embrace the potential of the aging population as a basis for future development." And I end the quote. So with that forward-looking agreement of our governments 20 years ago, I would like to again thank you all very much. Before adjourning this meeting, I would like to remind you that this afternoon at 3 p.m., the Commission will begin its consideration of Agenda Item 3C and hold a panel discussion on emerging issues entitled "Addressing the Social Impacts of Multifaceted Crisis to Accelerate Recovery from the Lingering Effects of the Pandemic through the Full Implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development." I also wish to remind delegations that the deadline for submission of draft proposals is this afternoon at 3 p.m. Thank you so much. Muchas gracias. The meeting is adjourned.